Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, brother.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Gamble Ramble. And once again, as you can see by this handsome gentleman on the screen, we have our friend, legendary rock and roller Todd Kerns, joining us on the Gamble Ramble once again. Thank you, brother.
Good to be here. Always good to be here. Drinking coffee, talking to a pal. You know,
Yeah, man. I should say good morning because you're in Vegas and it's what 10 a.m. where you are.
10 a.m. That's
Yeah, it's
right.
one in
Yeah,
the afternoon here in London.
that's
So
right. There you go.
yeah, man. You got yourself your coffee. Do you happen to have any of your damn it Todd Kerns shot of your liquor in there, perhaps?
I know it's a little early for all that. Good
A
Lord.
little early, yeah,
The
yeah.
only thing I brought myself in a some sort of like one of those soda
Nice.
water things.
Gotta stay hydrated.
Yeah. Well, I just kind of thought, well, I just walked by the fridge and thought, oh, I'm going to grab one of those too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like I was kind of using that as a little cheeky segue to talk about that. Because last time we talked back in July for the first time online,
Yeah.
and there was so much to talk about. And you're such a busy guy. In the last 3 months since we've spoken, you have
I
done
know.
more than most people do in a year. And I jokingly last time called you the hardest working man in show business, like meaning it, but also tongue in cheek. Actually think you might be one of the hardest working musicians that there is. Like, it's insane. Your fans
Yeah.
that are
Well,
watching us will have been keeping up with your schedule. No, but Todd was just about to depart for Italy last time. You've done two Italian tours with two different bands. Uh, he played with Triumph. Oh my God.
yeah. Yeah.
You've done touring and some shows with Took, including Def Leppard, opening for Def Leppard and stuff. So why don't we pick up where we left off? How was the first Italian tour? Now, forgive me, which band was that with again?
I'm trying to think which one that was or what the hell I was doing. I mean, I've managed to so basically during COVID, I'm sure I talked about this last time, but during the the lockdown, Will Hunt from Evanescence is an old friend of mine. He the drummer. He reached out and said, "Hey, my friend Steph Burns, who plays in well, he's got a great resume. Pablo Cruz, Sheila E., Huey Lewis, Alice Cooper. He's in the Wayne's World movie with Alice Cooper.
Oh,
But
wow.
he's been in Italy for several years, like I want to say decades, because he's been playing with an artist over there named Vasco Rossi, who is a massive artist over there. So he lives in Milano, and long story short, we just made a record during COVID, and we put it out, and it has legs over there in Europe, so we go over. So I've done it several times with them. The band is called Heroes and Monsters, and then I've done and might do it again this year before the end of the year. I've done acoustic tours by myself over there in Italy
Yes.
as well, which is really rewarding. It's something I really enjoy doing. It's interesting doing it like it's the closest to stand-up comedy there is because the only thing you have is an acoustic guitar and a microphone, so you're kind of like, but then all of a sudden I have this sort of like clash of English second language, at least sometimes no English at all or very little.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm very lucky to get over there. We do, I mean, I'll go over with Heroes and Monsters, and we'll do like the last run was something like 5 shows on, day off, 6 shows in a row.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
very punk rock in terms of like, how it is. It's like it's just such a hit and run. Like it's like I fly in overnight. I am, fly into a rehearsal day, so I've not really slept. I've kind of
Oh
slept on
man,
the
yeah,
plane.
yeah.
I'm not much of a plane sleeper, so I get off the plane. We go directly to rehearsal, knock it out, have the best sleep of my life that night,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then
I'm sure.
wake up the next day, and it's on. I'm into the first show, and it just kind of steamrolls through, and then we finish up. And the next thing I know, I'm back at the very same airport doing the exact reverse going home. So it's fascinating because uh, it's become really normal to me. MXP, Malpensa, the airport in Milano, is like, it feels like I know every nook and cranny of the airport now, and it's just kind of like, as well as I know the Vegas airport or the Vancouver airport, any of the airports that I
Yeah,
see a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of. And yeah, it's just really interesting, and it's one of those things that it's like, every once in a while I'll think to myself, because the other cool thing about it is we get to do like, there's the Milano, uh, Pisa, Roma,
Yeah.
Rome. It's like
Yeah.
I'm stuck with the Italian pronunciations of these names. But these cities that are obviously major centers, and then we go off into San Benedetto del Tronto, or all these kind of different smaller cities and smaller communities that no one would actually normally, if you were just a tourist, unless you were like backpacking around Italy, you probably wouldn't really see them. So I've managed to be able to see some very cool seaside towns and really
Yeah.
interesting stuff. And it's been really exciting. Like I say, it's like, someday I'll be, 85 years old on a couch telling my grandkids about, all this time I spent in Italy. And they'll be like, okay, right, Grandpa.
Turn your hearing aid up, Grandpa. Yeah, but no, I mean, I don't. That is true. I've spent a little time in Italy myself. I've never had the good fortune to go to Milan yet. Um,
Mm.
but Rome and Florence. They have the different.
Fiorenza, yeah. Yeah, they're it's like one of the greatest. I mean, it's really hard. I come back and I'm like immediately like, okay, time to dial it all in because I've been eating nothing but pasta. And, it's like you just kind of, you just can't help yourself. You just kind of lean right into it. It's like,
I know it's so delicious, right?
it's like, yeah, it's the bread and everything's
Yeah,
just so like rich. And so, so I come home and I'm like, oh, okay, time to dial it back and get all my
yeah.
pants.
I
Why
I
did all my pants
unfortunately
and my
too well
shirts shrink?
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, just for anyone that's keeping score. Now, Todd and I talked in July. He flew out and did that tour. He came home, and it's funny because it was announced a couple days after, if not the day after we did the interview. You weren't able to release the news that you were going to be playing with Triumph.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
as a
I'd like
Canadian, an '80s kid in Canada, I mean, that my head exploded when I heard that. I was so happy for you, brother, and you fucking nailed it.
Oh, thank you.
You and Brett both. And Phil, of course, right? But I mean, can you please tell me a little bit about that? Because you knew when we were talking, but obviously you couldn't tell me, right?
What's funny is I don't know if I knew because it really was very last minute. It was sort of like, hey, what are you doing Tuesday? It was kind of because
Oh, okay. It was that quick, Ed.
these kind of things happen. I don't know what day it was on. I'm just sort of, but it was kind of like one of those things where, I mean, no one really knows in a playoff season if there's going to be a next,
True
a
enough.
next round. So with that, it became we're going back to Edmonton. So and the Lay It on the Line, the song by Triumph, was being used in a some sort of playoff campaign. I don't remember if it was TSN or who was running it. Um, so the idea came up that what if we had Triumph come play Lay It on the Line? And the weird thing was that earlier Phil X and I had been speaking about a version of like Gil Moore has been talking about for years, doing some kind of homage type tribute type show for Triumph. The guys themselves are pretty retired. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that in
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're pretty like we're good. Everybody's kind of like there's not they've done so much and they've achieved so much that there's this sort of feeling of like if there's some way, and we've seen it now with Foreigner or Leonard Skinner or all these versions of bands out there floating around who don't really have any original members. And I don't know that they want to do something like that, but more like a tribute type show with video footage and all kinds of like sort of a retrospective type thing, but having musicians be able to um play the music live. So Phil had spoken to me about it, and then Brent, of course, became involved. And then, so it had only literally been spoken about. And then when this came up, it was sort of like, literally like, what are you doing in like 4 days from now? And I'm like, what's going on? And it's
Yeah,
like,
that was a little worrying when someone asked you
yeah.
that. It's either really good news or really bad news,
And
right?
I think I was getting ready for, you know what? I think I was getting ready for I went out with Steel Panther. Sorry to whoop, with my friends, this band that opened for the Slash band last year. Some friends of mine from Eastern Europe were doing a run of dates for 2 weeks, filling in or opening for Steel Panther. So I was preparing for that, and it was quite challenging because I was playing bass in that show, and their bass parts are all like Muse and very Tool involved, and I'm not really that kind of bass player, but they're friends of mine, and I we've done some collabs, and then it was kind of like 2 weeks with Steel Panther. That sounds like a blast. So I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, it's just one of those things. I look at my calendar and I go, yeah, that sounds like fun. So I'm deep into preparing for this. And then the phone rings and it's Phil X. And whenever you see Phil's name on your phone, you go, well, I should probably answer this.
Yeah. There's
And then,
probably something good on the
because
other end,
who
right?
knows what's on the other end of that phone call.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and long story short, we're going to play Lay It on the Line. Okay. Now we're going to play, and then it ballooned
It grew.
into Allied Forces and Fight the Good Fight. So Phil's gonna, and the crazy thing to me was kind of like, okay, so Gil's here, Gil's gonna be there, Rick's gonna be there, but for some reason, Phil's gonna sing Allied Forces, although that's Gil sang that, and I'm gonna sing Fight the Good Fight,
That's right.
and I'm like, so I'm speaking to Rick about it, and Rick's like, well, I'm older now, and I've been playing it, in a lower key, and I'm kind of like, I think people would rather hear Rick Emmett sing it in a lower key than the guy from the Age of Electric,
Yeah.
singing it in the original key or whatever. But Rick was like, "No, I think it'd be cool," and he was just so cool about it. Like he was sort of like, it wasn't like a laziness to it. Like it wasn't like, couldn't be
You go
bothered.
ahead, yeah.
It was more like he was just really generous and really cool about it. And I was like, if you would have told me, when I was a teenager that would be a thing, I'd
Yes.
be like, you're nuts. But here we are, and then like, we just went up and we did those 3 songs, and it was throw and go and hit and run, and we did a
Yeah.
quick rehearsal the day before, and it was very exciting because it was the game 2, I think, of that series. The last Canadian team to go all the way, and that was that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I watched it. I'm not a sports fan at all, but I watched it specifically to see you guys. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so happy and proud of you guys. I was like, fuck yeah, I mean, it's a Canadian kid rock and roll dream. But it's funny, with over the years, I've done a lot of shows. I would tour with Rick, but we've done a lot of support gigs with Helix and stuff bands I've been in where we supported Rick. And
Yeah,
you got it right. He either does an acoustic stripped down version where
yeah,
I think he's singing, like, take the melody and sings it an octave lower or changes
yeah.
the melody completely. Now, in his defense, that's a fucking high song. And he cut that as a very young man, right? You,
I always
though, you
say,
did the original version and nailed it.
well, I appreciate that. It was,
And
I kept saying, can we get a helium machine side stage? Because that would be really helpful. Just kind
well,
of go out
yeah,
there.
exactly. Right. I was watching you going, I know he's going to do it. I know he's going to do it, but God, let him please do it. Because it's such, especially there's one note in the song. Am I right? There's one
Oh,
sustained high note that's just,
it's ridiculous. I mean, I remember as a kid being like kind of almost like mad at him that he was, because he was like, he's that good a guitar player, that good of a songwriter, and that good of a singer.
yes.
I go like, I don't understand how, like, for all intents and purposes, it was like, and he looked great. He was a rock star, and it
Yeah,
was kind of like,
yeah,
it was like he had the whole package. You know what I mean? It was like,
yeah.
just a mega talent. And I think that's one of those things that, I mean, with Took, it's a constant sort of reminder and a constant sort of like, we just sharing our love of how much we love and respect all these bands. And I think that, digging into that catalog, you're like, wow, these guys are
Yeah.
ridiculous, and I mean, that's only touching, just barely touching the surface of a catalog that is like really deep.
That's true. I mean, I was in a band called Buffalo Brothers. We signed with Attic Records, which was the first
Yeah,
label that Triumph signed with. So when we
right.
signed with them, we got to go to the record company office. And, I wasn't a massive Triumph fan, but like everyone in Canada, it's kind of prerequisite that you at least know the songs you mentioned and a few others, the
Yeah,
staples, right? And then I walked around going, holy shit, this is, you get a real perspective on how big they actually were in a situation like that. And the same with a situation like yours, where you're investigating the catalog, learning songs, performing them. And what you said about Rick is funny because, the whole package thing with guitar, voice, and you meet someone like that, you're like, what I found in my experience, I bet they're an asshole. And you meet them and they're a nice person on top of it. It's like, God, what am I,
well, I mean, there's also something to be said about the nice Canadian boy kind of thing to it. In fact, when we're hanging around with Rick, I get these because he's such like a a salt of the earth Ontario guy. He kind of reminds me of like some of the retired hockey players I know. Like he just has that kind of energy. Like
That makes sense.
he's done something great, but he doesn't present himself as some sort of like he's not like one of those kind of like spray tanned white teeth kind of guys.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Which
yeah.
I'll probably be. Who knows? But it's kind of one of those things. He's just like a straight up regular Canadian dude who has done some crazy shit. I mean,
Yeah.
you take into account the US Festival set alone. I
Right.
very rarely have I watched somebody in front of a festival crowd like that play a guitar solo by himself and keep everybody very entertained. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's the Eddie Van Halens of the world and that kind of stuff, but watching Rick do that, I watched that set a while ago, and I was like, okay, well, I'm curious to see what I'd been years since I'd seen that set, and I was really fascinated watching Rick. Okay, he's going to bust out a guitar solo now by himself, and it was like, it was impressive. I mean, it was impressive as a as a guitar player. Yes, he's obviously impressive, but he had such a skill at keeping everybody kind of like roped in while you're kind of blazing and shredding and showing off. You're also kind of like keeping everybody kind of like, whoa, what's happening here?
Yeah, for
He's
sure,
in
right?
and out of his classical shit and all that kind of stuff. He's a ridiculous talent, and I think it's another one of the beautiful things about being Canadian is that a Canadian who's been around the world. Whenever you say you're from Canada, sometimes it's like there's usually only a couple of references that internationally people they'll be
I've
Rush
noticed this too. Yeah.
and it's Triumph. Sometimes I've had some bizarre ones. I was in New York City at CBGB's when we played there years ago. This would be in the '90s, and this girl goes, "Oh, you're from Canada," and she pulls up her pant leg, or maybe she had a dress on. I can't remember, and she had a skinny puppy tattoo on her leg. And another guy once said to me, "Oh, Voivod," and I go, "Yeah, you're right." So there
Yeah,
are
yeah,
interesting
yeah.
ones. But I mean, like you said before, it's kind of like I loved Triumph, but I wouldn't have said I was as big a Triumph fan as I was a Kiss fan or whatever.
Exactly. Same with me, right? But they were
But
definitely on your radar.
well, it's kind of like the omnipresence of Rush and Triumph, and then eventually like bands like the Tragically Hip. Like you didn't have to buy any of the records; you just knew every single song.
Part of the fabric of Canada for sure, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
If I may ask, and I'm not asking in a fishing for, gossip kind of way, was the vibe between them good? I hope that it was. The
It was
guys
actually,
themselves.
yeah, it was actually great. I mean, Gil has his entire family there, which is like really eye opening in terms of like it's just like a one off kind of thing in Edmonton. But he's been with his wife a long time. They have grown kids, and there's I don't know if they're boyfriends or husbands or
Yeah.
and or or wives. I'm not quite sure. They explained it all to me at the time, but it seems like there's a lot of young people who all have partners, and they all seem like really well adjusted, awesome people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very well put together, fit looking people,
Yeah.
and Gil's just again salt of the earth in a very ambitious kind of way. Like
No, of course.
he has that gene because even Rick will be like he even said to me, he goes, he goes, I never would have thought this would be possible. He goes, like Rick, Gil always talks about doing this and doing that, and we'll get these
Yeah.
guys and we'll go do this. And it all sounds like, it just sounds like Gil being Gil. But he goes, after playing with you guys, he goes, I totally get it now. And I really appreciated his confidence in that we sort of could do it respectfully. You know what I mean? And that
Sure.
means everything. I mean, as far as like, and having played with, over the years, I've been lucky enough to be on stage with guys from Loverboy, and I
Yeah.
filled in for Streetheart and bands like that. And it's kind of like these, although they're not necessarily household names in many occasions, to me they were everything as a up and coming
Of course.
musician. It's like that is everything, and I think that sometimes can be true about some club band that you knew, or some club band that I knew that no one's ever heard of, that were a really big deal to me because they were kind of a north star in terms of knowing, oh,
Yeah.
I want to do that. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think it speaks not only to your talent and professionalism that you were even asked. The two of you, three of you, including Phil, but Phil has a history with Triumph, which
Yeah, exactly.
a
Yeah.
whole other episode. But also the fact that we touched on this last time we chatted. It's not always just the best musician that gets the gig. It's the person that people want to be around, right? You're a very personable guy. and Fitz is too, right? I mean, you've obviously done something right over the years to attract that kind of the energy you exude is attracting a similar energy to you without sounding like Jerry Garcia too much. I'm starting to
Right.
fucking look like him though. Jesus Christ.
Hey,
It's
I
happening
like.
to me.
We all love
Uh,
Jerry. He's a
yeah.
legend. Yeah.
Yeah. But so I'm glad that it was a good experience. So moving on from that, like we touched on Italy, but you went back to Italy for a solo acoustic tour, and that must
Yeah.
have been very gratifying. Like you say, the closest thing to stand-up comedy there is just you and an audience and a microphone, essentially, right? And a guitar. Did it go well? Were you happy with that run of shows?
It was a blast. I mean, it was also my wife and I's 10-year anniversary that July, that May. I'm sorry. So we went over and we ate the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
You just go over and turn it into a trip. With a guitar tech and a tour manager, and we just went around
Boom.
the country. And it was kind of
That's a
it's real.
fantastic philosophy. Ate the world. I love that because it
Yeah, it
sums
was.
it up
I
in three
it
words, right? I
it's
get it.
just yeah. I keep saying it's just like the yes diet. You just kind of like just like, do you want to try this? Yes. How about this?
Yeah.
Seconds dessert? Yes. You're like, and the coffee and the whole experience is it's very my wife is immediately looking at real estate over there. It's kind of like it's become, like I said before, it's like if you would have told, I'm from Lanigan, Saskatchewan. I'm like from 1,500 people in the middle of the prairies. So to me, places like Toronto and Vancouver just seemed like impossible. It just seemed like, and so when you talk about Los Angeles or New York, or you talk about London, or you talk about Tokyo and all these places, it sort of becomes kind of like, it's a bizarre thing when you just sit down on a plane and you watch Mrs. Doubtfire and a few things, and the next thing you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm in Italy, and like,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
then Milano becomes sort of like familiar, and I love this coffee shop, I like this restaurant,
yeah,
and
yeah.
these things that you do, and yeah, it's I feel, I think that the word grateful gets tossed around a lot these days, but it really is 100% how I feel. Like I just kind of feel like I never would have guessed this would ever be a thing. And I suppose if the lockdown had never happened, if the pandemic had never affected us, it
Might
probably
not
wouldn't.
have.
I mean, although I've been there 100 times with Slash too. The Slash experience is so much more of a hit and run situation of seeing the hotels and venues and then vanishing onto the next town. But it's I am nothing but grateful, and I
Yeah.
can watch James Bond movies going like, oh wow, Istanbul, I've been there. It's like it's Budapest, I've been there. All these things are like are bizarre. So yeah, it was great. Like I
Yeah.
say, standing on stage with a guitar, I was back in 98, 97. I can't remember. Kevin Kane from the Grapes of Wrath, who now plays in, well, I think Grapes of Wrath are still doing stuff, but he also plays in the Northern Pikes. He asked me to come down and do an acoustic thing at the Railway Club, and he had a night there, I think, I want to say. And I was like, yeah, sure. Hang up the phone and then realize, wait a second, I've never done that before. I've never
Yeah.
actually stood on
Yes.
stage with an acoustic
Said
guitar and
yes and then
just,
worried about it.
yeah. And I was sort of like, but it's sort of been my MO in a lot of ways, that I kind of find myself in situations where I kind of say yes to things and then figure out how to navigate through that. But it's
Working so far.
well, yeah. I mean,
You know?
honestly, it's like even when, with Slash, it's kind of like I started as a bass player. I played, everybody's always kind of like, it's weird to see you, back when that happened, it was kind of like, it's weird to see you playing bass. And I was kind of like, well, you would have said the same thing if you'd seen me, fronting the Age of Electric, because everything up until that point, I was a bass player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, it was kind of like this sort of jackknife ability of being able to go chink. Okay, now I'm a guitar player. Clink. Now I'm the bass player.
Yeah.
Clink. Now I'm the lead singer. It's sort of like once that whole thing happened, and once the Age of Electric and then Static and Stereo and all that kind of went away, I just sort of went, well, you have to really have a hard look at life and go, well, what do I want to do and how do I want to do this? And then finding yourself in somewhere like Las Vegas where, all my friends play music and like, hey, you want to come down and play bass on this and play guitar on that? And I'm like, yeah. And it really sort of made me kind of like, what Fitz and I always refer to as, as being a musician, as opposed to, oh, that guy, he's a guitar player. that guy, he's a keyboard player or
That makes
whatever.
sense.
So
Sticks is similar like you. Like he's also
yeah,
a Swiss Army knife, an accomplished keyboard player, guitarist, bass player, writer.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's what a
you
thing
kind
to
of
be,
have
though.
to.
What a thing to be. Like, I
Yeah, I
hit
mean, it
things
could be
with
worse.
sticks, and that's all I do, right? So, I mean, may I ask you, going back to, for those that are watching for the first time, Todd has a brother who is a successful musician. His brother John as
Yeah.
well. They were in the band of Age of Electric together, and John was a bass player. So,
Hmm.
was it like a Eddie and Alex Van Halen thing where one started on guitar and one started on bass, and then you switched, or did you always both just play both? Do you know what I mean? Did you always have a bass lying around? And
Well, I've always it's funny because I've told this story before, and it's always amusing to me because I was I basically had an acoustic guitar. My father, I played his. He had this old beat up harmony guitar, and the action was like
yeah,
was
yeah,
really hard. And eventually, it was kind of like, oh, we should get you a guitar. So I got an Epiphone acoustic as a kid, my dad had this weird idea of like, we should get you a bass guitar. And I was like, okay. I mean, I hadn't even wrapped my head around. I was barely playing through, I was playing campfire chords and, getting around playing, just basic songs, and he was like, and so it was interesting to go from like the next step would be, we should get you an electric guitar, you would think, but it was kind of like more like, we should get a bass guitar. And I was kind of like, okay. And I remember standing there in Edmonton. I lived in northern Manitoba at the time, but we had family in both Saskatchewan, and his family was from Alberta. So
yeah.
and I got the acoustic from there as well. So it was probably the next year or whatever, we went down there, and he goes, we're standing there, and I look up, and there was a Gretsch Super Axe, which is a crazy Chet Atkins 80s kind of. Rick Springfield played one in the 80s. It was a really crazy looking guitar, and it was just an electric six string. And then there was an EB3 Jack Bruce style, SG style Gibson bass. And he goes, what do you think? And I'm kind of like, I don't know. I'm like a kid and I barely play guitar. So long story short, we walked out of there with this Gibson EB3, and the whole world just opened right up, because back then, we're talking about the 80s, I guess, everybody wanted to be Eddie Van Halen or Tommy Lee.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was kind of like everybody was playing drums and everybody was playing guitar, or everybody wanted to be David Lee Roth. You know what I mean? It was like, or some sort of, they got like your blonde lead singer, and I had a bass, and the fact that it said Gibson on the headstock was a big deal, because everybody was playing Squires and affordable guitars. You know what I mean? So it was like, oh wow, this guy's got a Gibson. I ended up playing in bands with guys who were out of high school, and I was still 14 years old. So so I had started as a bass, but when I say I was always playing guitar, I eventually got an electric
But you
guitar.
started your career, like your working career, gigging career, as a bass player.
As a bass player, yeah, and eventually,
cool. Didn't really catch that. That's amazing.
And then eventually a singing bass player, because the game of any sort of high school band or basement band is the who's the least worst singer in the band. It's kind of like, hey, you sing this. How about you sing one? How about you sing one? And eventually it was like, Todd sing this, Todd sing this, Todd sing this. And it became like, it wasn't like some sort of egotistical stance that I was like, I'm the lead singer. It was more like that. I just found myself kind of being sort of, we originally started as a 5-piece, and were sort of eventually pared down to a 3-piece, where I was the bass player, lead singer, like a power trio. And then I eventually went on the road playing with a bunch of bands. And while I was away, my brother picked up the bass and became a far better bass player than me in a lot of ways. Like, he was really into Steve Harris. He played with his fingers. I was a punk rock guy. I played with a guitar pick. I played.
He played acoustic, classical guitar, or is that what you're saying?
No. He was playing
guitar.
He was playing bass with his fingers. Like,
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said he was a guitar player before.
No.
A bass player.
No, he wasn't really interested in guitar at all. He immediately went to bass. He was sort of really into Steve Harris and Iron Maiden and guys like that. So he and I went off on the road and played in bands, singing and playing bass. And then I met Kurt Dahl, the drummer for the Age of Electric, and his little brother played guitar. And Kurt and I were best friends, and it was sort of like, we should put a band together. And it was like, yeah, we should get our brothers. That'd be cool. I mean, kind of an interesting thing to have two sets of brothers. And my little brother plays bass, so I'll just move out. I'll just start playing rhythm guitar, like Paul Stanley style, and he'll play bass. And that's basically how that decision was made because I got around on lead guitar, but it was never my interest. It's so funny because people will say to me all the time, like, but as a guitar player, my guitar was always really low, and I just liked playing.
It is, baby. That's how it should be.
Well, I liked playing, like Pete Townsend and Keith Richards and Rick
Yep.
Nielsen and Paul Stanley, guys like that, Ace Frehley, guitar solos and stuff like that. But it was a time where everybody was
Jimmy Page, guitar down to the knees, man.
well, yeah,
Johnny
exactly,
Ramone,
yeah.
Johnny Ramone
All
even,
the
right?
Ramon stuff, I was so much more of a punk rock kind of,
Yeah.
that kind of rock kind of guy. But all my friends were like Eddie Van Halen types, and I was like, okay, well then he can play that, and I'll play this.
Exactly. Exactly
And
right.
it wasn't like Ryan Dahl was Eddie Van Halen because he wasn't at all. We were not that kind of band at all. But by that point, it was sort of like Ryan's the guitar player, Kurt plays drums, my brother plays bass, and I'll play guitar and sing.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the established idea of what that was for 10 years of my life. And then after that, I went on to do Static and Stereo and solo stuff where I was sort of the singer guitar player. But I had always played bass. I played bass on my own recordings and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and then when that tide turned, I found myself with a bass in my hands, which I'm surrounded by.
Yeah,
You know,
and
yeah.
that isn't that
And
fantastic? Though,
and
and all of
guitars,
that
yeah.
came about because your dad said, "Why don't we get a bass for you?"
I
I
know
mean,
it's
you
so
have to think
weird.
about that as
Yeah.
kind of I don't know, strange isn't the word, but like I mean, in a good way. It's kind of I don't know. Isn't it funny how it turned out? That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? It actually became a
It's
profession for you.
it's
You know?
bizarrely fortuitous, I think is the best way to say it. Because in reality, there are times where I thought to myself, because I went through phases where I would learn guitar solos and be like, The Wall, like David Gilmour, and the kind of guys that I kind of gravitated towards were not like these super fast kind of guys, but more
Yeah.
feely, kind of like smooth kind of cats. And I thought I could do this if I really applied myself, but it always kind of felt like, and it's a weird, it's sort of a self-defeatist perspective that I kind of had this thing like where those guys are already like sixth degree black belts, and I'm back here in my yellow belt going like bling blong bling, and I kind of thought like, and saying that I played in three-piece versions of my solo band where I was the lead guitar player, but I was doing
Sure.
all
You
that stuff.
can
I was
do it.
just
You do it, right?
but it was exactly like I was talking about the Rick Nielsen's and all that kind of stuff. Like
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was like doing the kind of stuff that I like to play. I'm not the kind of guy that, I'm not, obviously the Angus Young type guitar players are my favorite kind of things. And a lot of the shreddy type stuff wasn't all that interesting to me, but I still love it. And I'm still very impressed by it, but I just wasn't something I was interested in trying
I
to learn to
understand.
play.
What's
So
your
long story short,
motivation? Yeah.
I found myself with a bass guitar in my hands, but now, and now with Took, it's like now I'm back to the rhythm guitar player, lead singer position. And for whatever reason, the drummer from Slash's band plays bass in that band, Brent Fitz, and keyboards. So it's kind of like, it's like I said before, it's like being a musician where it's kind of like, it kind of feels like you're in the backyard and there's a fire going and a bunch of friends are sitting around and there's a ukulele right here
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and a bunch of stuff just lying around, and you think to yourself, okay, well, let's figure out how to make a noise out of this that's relatively pleasing.
Yeah,
And that sort of feels like my life. And does anybody know the words to this song? And off we go,
yeah, yeah, I hear
and
you.
that's sort of been my life, and it's sort of currently the way things just sort of keep sort of going.
Sure. Would you find that your ability and likelihood to say yes ties into that? Like, I mean, people sometimes look at life as one narrow lane. I find this is what I am. This is what I do. My job defines me. Whatever. But I mean, the fact that you're willing to pick up a ukulele and learn to play it says a lot about you as a musician. And I mean, I'm finding as life gets on, I wish I knew these things. That, as the faces put it, I wish I knew now. Then what I know now, right? Because I find that that's people that have that positive attitude and are more willing to adapt and try things like yourself, more opportunities come their way. Do you feel that that's true? Like if for you, you find that your willingness to jump in has helped you get into situations you maybe wouldn't have gotten into otherwise?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think I've been lucky enough to also have people who actually cared and sort of, sometimes they would challenge you with stuff, knowing that you can do it. and it came from a good place, because sometimes people are just um, they're just they they're challenging you in a sort of like competitive way. But so
Yeah, yeah.
I've been lucky enough to be around people who are not challenging you, but sort of almost daring you to jump a little higher and to
Yeah.
go a little further and do things that you can get out of your comfort zone a little bit about. And I think that ever since the Age of Electric kind of disbanded, the whole thing became kind of like, because for 10 years of my life, I'm this guy. I am the lead
Yeah,
singer of
yeah.
the Age of Electric. And then after that, you kind of have to define yourself as a whole bunch of things, and I think that that's very, what's the word? Enlightening, really, because you kind of feel like, well, there's no restrictions anymore. I can do basically anything I want. And like I say, it's like, like I just looked at my calendar this morning. I've had like about a week off, and it's been kind of glorious, just kind of like waking up with my wife and going, I don't know, what do you want to do today? And
Yeah,
just
that must be great.
and doing stuff. And it's like, it's so rare, but it's kind of like, now I'm sort of starting to kind of like, have to head into the next chapter of like getting ready for this, getting ready for that, trying to work out the calendar as to how we're going to make all that work. I got to figure out flights to here. It's just, my life is this sort of constant work in progress, as most people's are. But um, it does kind of like, like we're going to be playing at this Kiss event here in November. So years ago, just before Fitz and I started playing with Slash, we had done a one-off with Bruce Kulick. Bruce Kulick from the non-makeup Kiss
Yeah.
years was releasing his third solo album, and he wanted to do
I
a
know
CD.
Bruce. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's
He's
the best.
a wonderful
I
person.
was I was literally just on the phone with him before I got on with you.
Nice.
And I say that like in a weird fascination of having seen him at the Agrodome in Regina, Saskatchewan in 1985, when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
now, seeing him with Kiss, my favorite band. And now all these years later, I'm on the phone with him going like, okay, yeah, let's do this, let's do that, But there's
That's
something to
good.
be said about the fact that, even then, like back then, I had found myself in Las Vegas. I kind of I made friends with Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat.
Yeah, yeah.
He
That's
had
a sweet guy. I met him once, and he seemed like a really sweet
yeah,
cat. You know.
he's like a brother, yeah. So we started we did it. He was like doing this sort of reunion show with reunion run with a version of Faster Pussycat. It was very complicated. At the time, I was sort of like, I didn't really ask a lot of questions. He was like, "Hey, you want to come out and play guitar on this?" And I was like, I'd never been to Europe at that point, which is a weird thing to say, having been like in the Age of Electric and all those things, and I had never been to Europe. And I was
Mm,
like, absolutely, just for the opportunity to go over there, and
yeah.
and then come back to Vegas and fall back into whatever residency type shows I was already doing. Because at that point, it was a weird feeling of like, I wouldn't say I was retired, but I kind of was really enjoying the idea of like, so I can play Tuesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night in Las Vegas and sleep in my own bed. And then,
Mhm.
and I would bounce back and forth, Vancouver back down, and just kind of, I was just kind of living a bizarre sort of like,
On the road.
a relatively,
Jack Kerouac kind of life.
yeah, but a relatively routine one, in terms of like, I just drive 20 minutes over to that gig, 20, minutes over to that one, 15
Yeah.
there. It was like very sort of like casual. And then bouncing back up to Vancouver to see my family and then back. Um, but then this thing came up and I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's go. So we went over there for, I don't even know, it was several weeks, from the UK into Italy, Greece, Spain. So I've never been to Greece since. But when we came back to Vegas, we put together the Sin City Sinners. We just thought, well, it'd be fun to do like we had the idea of doing it on a Tuesday night at this place called the Dive Bar. It's still around too. It changed locations, but it was just a punk rock bar. It had like kind of like one or two lights on the stage. It wasn't really set up
Yeah, yeah.
for anything, but we thought it's a Tuesday night. We have a lot of friends in Vegas who play in multiple shows, Blue Man Group or whatever it is. Rock of Ages was, all these kind of different shows. And we thought, well, it's kind of what they call, like whether it's Monday or Tuesday, a lot of shows go dark. They usually have a night off. So if the musicians are kicking around, they got a day off, come jam with us. It'll be fun. and that grew into being like having George Lynch come play with us, having Slim Jim Phantom come play with us. All these dudes, Sylvain from the New York Dolls. We had almost anybody we
That
could,
must have been wild.
it was nuts. So eventually, people, the casinos started hiring us, like actual showrooms that were like, I mean, bands like Steel Panther had started to kind of play in there. The rock and roll hard rock thing had not really kind of presented itself in terms of there'd be like an 80s show, guys dressed
Yeah,
as
yeah, I know what you're saying.
80s people playing like 80s new wave and stuff like that because it's dance music, but the idea of having rock music or even what we were doing was more like punk rock, kind of punk rock with, inflections of like Motorhead and AC/DC kind of going on.
Which
Um,
which have elements of
and
punk
Kiss.
anyway. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So we kind of went and they started booking us in these casinos and it started to do well enough to be doing, regular residency type things.
Yeah.
So that kind of whole thing was sort of what, so when the Slash thing came up, and I've said this before, this is a long route I'm taking to get to I've lost track of what the hell we were talking about in the first place. But I know my point was to be like, when the Slash thing came up, I have to be honest, it was sort of, I had resigned myself in a funny way to go like, look, I bought a house. I was sort of like, like doing just fine. I was in Las Vegas. I had a good life. I was, I,
Settled.
I was
I mean, as much as a musician can be, you were settled into a home and
in a weird way. Yeah, it was sort
yeah,
of like I think I was pretty satisfied with like
yeah,
putting that kind of quote unquote artist part of myself on
yeah.
ice a little bit, like kind of being like because you start to kind of realize that there's a lot that comes with being let's get in a van together and drive across the country 100 times and just like, man, I've been doing that for like 20 years.
And I hear you, brother. I hear you.
And then it's sort of like the idea of being able to do this. So when the Slash thing came up, it was kind of like, I wouldn't say it was a slam dunk of an answer. And I know that sounds ridiculous to say, but it was just more like, dude, I have like I said, I bought a house. I have a really good life for myself. And what is this? I'm one of the biggest Guns N' Roses, especially Appetite fans. And I'm kind of like, okay, let's, and I was like supporting his solo run. And I thought, that sounds really exciting. That sounds really fun. I just assumed it was like going to be 3 months of flying out, playing on Leno, we did all that stuff, Conan or
Yeah.
whatever it was. And then it was like, we'll do a quick, run around the country, run around the world, and then that'll be it. And they'll be like high five, never see each other again. But the fact that it's like 15 years later and we're still talking about like
That's not
we're
wild,
putting
man.
a
I
new
just
record
thought of
out.
that before the interview. 15 fucking
Yeah.
years. That's
Yeah, it's so bizarre to me.
well,
I don't remember how we initially got down this onto this track, but that's kind of where I was going with it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say, Todd, it's funny because prior to the Conspirators, Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, the Slash, he had also put out a couple solo albums and done a
Yeah.
couple, Snake Pit and
Mm-hmm.
Blues Ball. I believe he's had these different
Yeah.
permutations of projects that he put out, and they did fine. They did okay, but didn't have staying power. But something about this lineup, it's a fucking band, I think is what it is. Pardon my cursing, I swear like a trucker, but
Please. Who's
as
going
a
to
fan
stop
of
you?
Slash, I've always supported everything that he's done. But sometimes it felt like Slash with a bunch of guys behind him. With no disrespect to anyone involved. With you
No.
guys,
Yeah.
it feels like a band. It really does. There's a chemistry. Obviously, Slash is like, he's fucking Slash, right? But even on stage, you guys fit well together. It looks, it smells, it sounds, it feels like a band. You know what I mean? It's a real
Well, I
thing.
think I think you have to
That's the
take into
defining
account.
difference.
Yeah,
That's why
I
you're
think
15 years in.
well, that's
I
exactly
think.
it. But I think you have to take into account that the Snake Pit was initially started when he was still a member of Guns N' Roses. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was sort of like that was literally just a project. It was literally like, hey, let's get Mike Inez and Gilby and Matt and make a fun record while we're literally waiting for what will eventually become Chinese Democracy, where none of those people will be involved. But it was kind of like this bizarre time where they were like, knowing Slash like I know him, it's like the fact that I'm sure Use Your Illusions, those records must have been very difficult for him because they took so long to make.
Yeah.
Not like Chinese Democracy, obviously, but because I know him to be the kind of guy when he comes in with a riff, it's not a riff, it's like a song. It's like, and so
Yeah.
it's very easy for a guy like Miles to go, okay, that's the verse, that's the chorus. I mean, they obviously make changes based on like, should this be half as long? All that stuff that comes along with arranging. But it's, and then the songs just become the song. So, but the idea of making a record, and I think that's sort of part of what is the masterpiece of things like Use Your Illusion in the first place, is the fact that there's a lot more going on than just kind of like knocking out riffs. But yeah, I think with us, it became more like, even then, I think it was an experiment. I think there was the idea that he'd done a solo album with Chris Cornell and Miles was on it, Lemmy, Iggy Pop, all these people. And now I want to go out and support this thing. So
That's initially what this was supposed to be, right?
yeah, exactly. So we just surround himself with a band, and Andrew Stockdale from Wolfmother came out and sang on a couple of performances that we did. The first performances we ever did, we did Leno was the first thing we ever played live together, and a couple of other TV appearances with Andrew because he was singing the first single, and he's gotten up and sang that song with us several times since, and then when we started doing shows, Miles was the lead singer. So, and I didn't know Miles. I didn't know Bobby, the other guitar player at the time. I didn't know Slash. I mean, I'd met Slash once before, but that's a 1,000 years ago. But I knew Fitz, so that became kind of like. But I think once we'd sort of done it, it was just sort of like very casually that he mentioned to me in we're well into the tour. We're well into the We're All Gonna Die tour in 2010. And he just kind of like, we're standing there at our wardrobe cases. I was in this position now. We have wardrobe cases. And
amazing.
You go from being in Vans to suddenly I have a wardrobe case. I'm sharing it with Fitz.
Throwing your wet stage clothes in your
exactly.
bag.
In your backpack.
You got to get in the van to get to the next 12-hour Canadian drive.
It was like we're standing there and we're getting ready to go on stage, and he goes, and he's not even looking at me. We're just kind of like looking at our stuff, and he goes, I think we're gonna do the new record with the band. And I'm kind of like, you mean like us? And he goes, yeah. And I go, okay. It was like, that was as much of a discussion as there was. It was just a sort of like, we're gonna do the new record, and which ended up being Apocalyptic Love in 2012, I guess. And we started with 3 songs. I think everything was a bit of an experiment. I think that even then he was kind of like, because Slash loves being in a band. He loves for there to be a group of dudes in the photos, in the studio, on the record. So it's never like one of those records where I'm playing. I mean, other than that, obviously Guns N' Roses, Snake Pit, Velvet Revolver, and the first solo album, all those parts are played by obviously Duff McKagan, Johnny Gasparic, Mike Inez, different guys like that. So, but then as of like 2012 till today, 13 years later, 2 years after I started playing with Slash, those parts are all mine, so it's kind of like, and now, like when we play shows, he's like not interested in playing anything except for Conspirators music. He's sort of, we'll bust out a Guns song for fun. Like he's like, he had me sing Perfect Crime and Don't Damn Me, weird deep cuts, not deep cuts, but if you're a Guns fan, they're not deep, but they're, they're.
Well, you wouldn't think he would be playing those. I know that fans would be really surprised if people like Don't Damn Me at a show. I'd be going, that's fucking awesome,
But Guns never played it live, so it was kind of like one of those crazy things that we, that's another thing when it goes back to that yes mentality that you talked about before, which I guess was that long-winded thing. When Slash goes to you, he's hit me with a couple where I've gone like Garden of Eden. I don't know if you know that song off Use Your Illusions, but it's the crazy dabba dabba da. There's a bouncing ball in the video because he's actually just rambling. He's asked me on a couple of times, like, we should do that sometime. And I go, and I've listened to it and gone like, Jesus, I would need like literally a teleprompter, and the teleprompter would be moving.
Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
But I go, there's a reason why they never played it live either. But it's a killer song, and maybe I should just start working on it now, so that by the time we get around to doing anything, I can do it. But Don't Damn Me wasn't much different. It was a lot of like, there's a lot of, it's constantly changing and ongoing, but it's that kind of thing where I think that sometimes guys like Slash challenge you in a good way to go like, hey, you want to sing Don't Damn Me? And I go, I love that song. I go, sure, let's do it, and then I listen to it and I go, oh God, but I do it all the time. I do it with Bruce Kulick all the time. He goes, hey, you want to try My Way from Crazy Nights? And I go, I love that song.
I noticed that with Bruce. You guys do a lot of really cool deep cuts and stuff that like you would never hear anywhere else. Kiss never played
No.
them live, you know.
Well, and that's why, because I again sit down and go like, what have I got myself into? Because it's Paul Stanley singing at the peak of his ability at that time, and I'm like, oh God, what have I got myself into? Luckily having someone like Zach Throne there to kind of carry the Gene Simmons parts is it sort of makes it a half and half show, so that's kind of good. But it
When
is
in
a
doubt,
lot.
just slide, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Luckily, I'm such a huge fan of Guns and I'm such a huge fan of Kiss that it's often when these things are pitched to me to try, I sort of go, I'm already kind of halfway there as far as like, well, I love that song. Now I just have to sit down and learn it. Sometimes when someone comes at you and goes, we're going to play a song that you've never heard before, that's a different thing.
For sure, right? For sure. Well, that's wild. I mean, I just reflecting on all of this stuff. It just like to me, I know that you're used to it because you live it, right?
Right. Well,
I always feel an affinity with you and Fitz and Phil and Dan Spreewald and these guys. Like Dan was from my area, Um, you made the
who's
right
he play
moves,
with?
but to see the stuff you guys are doing vicariously, like I lived through it, which kind of leads me to another question. I know that there's the unwritten rule about we don't ask about money and things like that. Well, I've never been class enough to do that, but I do have to ask in an extended kind of way. I'm assuming playing with Slash that some standards have gone up, like travel and hotels and things like that. One would have to assume. So staying on safe ground without getting too specific, how fucking cool is it to play with Slash and like I mean you get travel business class and stay in nicer places and things like that, or is it pretty much just stripped down, still rock and roll touring, like out on a bus and.
Well, it is all those things. I mean, Slash, the coolest thing about Slash is people are always like, so he has his own bus, right? I go, in Guns N' Roses, I think he has his own bus. But with us, we just get on a bus together,
Yeah, yeah.
We have a crew bus and then we have a band bus, but it's like,
Which is in these days in this economy also a bit of an extravagance, but I mean something that Slash has earned. You're not going to put
yeah,
Slash and yourselves too. You're not going to put you
yeah,
guys in with 12 sweaty guys in a bus. I mean, people at least
yeah,
deserve
yeah.
some privacy and some space, right? So please continue.
But saying that, it's still kind of like, I'm anybody who has, if you're lucky enough to even to be on a tour bus. I
Yeah.
had a great conversation with Jay Bentley from Bad Religion, and he was telling me the story of how it was touring in a van, then eventually graduated to a van and trailer, eventually graduating to two vans and two trailers,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
was like, wow.
yeah.
I go, and then he said somebody just sort of looked at us one day and said, like, if you're traveling with these two vans and two trailers, don't you think that if you just rented a bus, you'd probably be,
You
or
come
a
out
bus and a
ahead, right?
trailer? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were like, so they kind of always did this math game of like eventually working their way up to a bus.
Yeah.
And in the punk rock world, especially for guys like that who'd been like literally sleeping on floors
Yeah.
in the beginning,
Asking
I
people
mean,
if you can fans if you can crash at their house after the show, right? I've done
it
it
was
myself. Yeah.
it was a totally a scene back in the punk rock days. The DOA were the originators of that kind of punk rock house crashing. But that you work your way up to just crashing on a bus, which doesn't sound it sounds a lot more extravagant than traveling around in a van, but you're still kind of camping all summer, like a 6 week tour or something like that. You're literally camping. You're kind of like the Theory of a Dead Man guys. They pull into a Walmart parking lot, and that's their day off. They pull out like they got like video games on the bus, and they got like a barbecue type thing that they set up, lawn
Yeah.
chairs, and I'm like, it's just so like it's a gypsy lifestyle that people
For
kind of.
sure.
And I was the kind of kid that said that sounds amazing. Let's do that.
Yeah, okay, that
Um,
makes sense. That appealed
but
to your adventurous spirit, I would imagine.
yeah, in the Slash camp, it's sort of a mix of all of that. It's sort of a mix of like we get to travel very comfortably, we get to
Yeah.
stay in nice hotels, and anybody who has um, punk rock toured would find our kind of tour very cushy compared to, obviously the Guns N' Roses thing is
Yeah,
even more
that's
so.
extreme luxury, right?
They have their own jet, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's wild.
And Guns N' bands like the Rolling Stones and all that kind of stuff. That level of comfort is, which is, I mean, at a certain point, some of these men are advanced age where and people are of an advanced age where I think the only way to really do it would be with some level of comfort. I mean,
Yeah,
you
of
can't
course.
ask, an 85-year-old guy, or 82-year-old guy or whatever it is. I mean, well, God bless all the old blues guys that were doing it, the John Lee Hookers and all those guys.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've done it in every possible configuration you can think of. But no, it's very comfortable in the Slash camp. I think we all go off and do other things, whether it's Took or in Frank's world, it's Mammoth, and in Miles's world, it's Alter Bridge, which is also pretty comfortable. But Miles always talks about when he does his solo thing, it's a lot more like he's sort of responsible for that kind of bottom line. He's responsible for that,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So
The
the
different budget, different set of standards, different venues, and
yeah, and
he's a
it's
successful guy for sure in his own right. But
absolutely, but it's coming out of his
there's Guns N'
pocket.
Roses,
Yeah,
and there's different levels. I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
yeah, and it's just kind of like the nature of touring, and a lot of it depends on how I mean, there's in the Took world, we fly out for weekends. We do the odd extended run here and there.
yeah,
But a lot of the world in 2025, whether like my friends in Quiet Riot or something like that,
yeah,
they fly out every weekend and they
yep.
play like 2-3 shows and then they fly home. And it's become sort of the industry standard of almost every single casino type level act that does that kind of thing, and they do really well.
Well, I'll be honest with you. That's what I miss about the Helix gig because I enjoyed that. I loved
Yeah.
about the Helix gig was that towards the end, especially, we were doing flyouts. We would just go out and do a weekend, 3 shows in 3 provinces, come home with a pocket full of money and a smile on my face.
Yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
too straining and it was relatively comfortable. So,
As a
can I ask you,
musician, it's
Todd, while
kind
we're
of
on the
like, go ahead.
topic? Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. No, as a musician, it's the dream. Really, you get to play music. You're taken care of. That's all that matters. Yeah, but go ahead.
And like you were saying too, it's the same thing. Playing music with a guy who I paid money at my local arena to
Of
buy a
course.
ticket
Yeah.
and stand up front, and I gave him an R. For 7 years, I gave him too
Yes.
many R's.
I'm
But
still giving him an R. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. What I wanted to ask you is in a kind of an aside. I've done some tour bus touring, not as much as I would like, but a little bit. Um, but I've never done the double decker European tour buses. Have you had? What is that like? I'm assuming you've done it,
Oh,
or seen one, or been on.
no, we do it all the time. It's
Yeah,
what we call it is the cool thing about the double deckers. Well, the weird thing is it's a little bit more like in an American bus, which is just a one level
yeah.
bunks. It's usually like the sort of kitchen galley, then it's bunks, and then there's a back
The
lounge,
back lounge, yeah.
or the Dolly Parton world, there's an actual bed back there.
Back bedroom, yeah.
But we usually have just like the front lounge and a back lounge with bunks in between. Um, you can stand up in that and walk around, but in the European ones, the downstairs is fine. I think
You
upstairs,
can stand up and walk
yeah,
around? No, I'm
well,
serious. Like, can you?
yeah, oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Jesus.
But it's it can be a little bit like you got to be careful. But in the Euro ones, I think upstairs is a little more kind of cramped. But there's in those buses, the galleys downstairs. There's a hang down there, a TV, bus
Yeah.
drivers in the front. Then there's a stairs that go up, which is always dangerous because you always hear stories of people because the bus is driving and people wake up in the middle of the night to go downstairs to the bathroom and the bus hits a bump and somebody falls down the stairs, that kind of thing. But there's another lounge upstairs, and our lounge upstairs is always called Conspirators Lounge because the three of us hang out up there, which is kind of I always kind of feel bad. Like it's not like Slash is not invited up there. We just kind of like Slash is such a cool. He sits downstairs and he's kind of quiet and he's watching whatever he's watching. He's always a very quiet guy. And Frank and I are very loud and very laughing at this and that. And we want to watch something dumb. It's usually something, well, when I say dumb, it's like we watch everything from like the silliest movies to Mr. Robot or something quite, really, really fun. But,
Compatible sense of humor, right?
yeah, we're loud and we're still, I wouldn't say wild because it's a very sober experience at this point in our lives. But anyway, we call it the Conspirators Lounge up there, and then the bunks. And then there's also a front lounge there where you just kind of have a seating area, which is what we call. Miles usually sits up there because he's usually kind of getting away from because he's like a monk on the road. The poor guy, he's like always taking care of the voice. Yeah.
Makes
Poor guy.
sense. Because I've noticed those lounges on those buses tend to have like a horseshoe shaped couch kind of at the back on the second level. Some of them like it. It's actually
Yeah,
pretty cool. It
yeah,
looks kind of
yeah.
like the old '70s airplane
They can, yeah. I mean,
lounges. You know what I mean?
yeah, the ones we have is kind of more like an L, but yeah, you're not wrong. Or sometimes like
Okay.
cross from each other. Yeah, it's like I
Do you have
say,
a preference for the for European buses over North America? Do you find like do you prefer that? Do you think we should try and have that here?
well, I do dig the European buses, but I think the main reason that we dig them so much is because often the drives are a lot shorter. It feels like it anyway. I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting living in Canada because you know as well as I do, the drives can be murder. You know, I mean, like I used to always laugh because we were based out of Vancouver, and I'd say, you know, by the first show in Calgary, you're destroyed because you've already been driving for 12 hours. You know, it's like
Sure.
in America, you can drive, from Detroit to whatever the next show is in a couple of hours, So, and in Europe and England and all that kind of stuff, same thing, from London up to Manchester or Birmingham or whatever like that. It's significant distance, but it's still only a few hours. It's not like Canada is just, well, I mean, Calgary to Edmonton, that's one thing. Then you got to
Oh
go,
yeah, but
start working
that's
around.
but Thunder Bay to Winnipeg or
Oh yeah, yeah.
Sudbury to Thunder Bay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's the real murderer because I remember those first few times it was kind of like we get as far as Thunder Bay and you kind of have this sense of like Toronto's just over there and it'd be like, but it's not.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
not at all, right?
yeah. You're
I
like
know.
you got to get to Sudbury and hopefully and work that whole thing. So I that's why I never really understood in a lot of ways. Like after the fact, after spending a lot of time in Southern Ontario, I go, this makes so much more sense in a way as a Canadian artist because you can play, multiple shows from Toronto, Hamilton,
Yeah,
Burlington,
every hour in any
every
direction, there's some sort of city,
Kitchener
right?
or whatever. Yeah, it's like all these different towns, and then we moved to Vancouver, directly the other side of the country, which I have no regrets about because I love that town and it's been so great to us, and continues to be great to me. And now
Oh
too
Jesus,
is
Todd,
there
you
all
have
the
a
time.
star on the Walk of Fame in Vancouver. Like I know you're a modest guy, you, but come on, that must I'm sorry, that's fucking amazing. That must as humble as you are, your mind must have been blown though. Like
The
I
other
was
day,
so happy for you when I saw
the
that.
other day I walked by there because we were doing a show in Vancouver, and I walked by just to walk down Granville Street, and I think about it all the time because when the Age of Electric first came to Vancouver, we stayed at a place on the south end of Granville Street in a shady hotel, and we would
Yeah,
walk over to the gig at a place called Club Soda, which it's
I remember
condos
Club
now.
Soda.
But we would walk through this gaggle of prostitutes. We didn't know they were prostitutes. I just felt like I was in a. I
Nice
thought it was.
Prairie Boys, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, totally. We were like had a big piece of
Gee,
straw
her
hanging out. We're
skirt is
like,
short. Yeah.
this sure is a big, and it just felt like we were in like a Whitesnake video or something. Like everything, all the girls scantily clad. And then I remember the sound guy when we got to the gig and we were doing the thing. And he goes, and he was talking about like this is that and that is this. And he goes, be careful of the girls you meet in this place because a lot of them are prostitutes. And I was like, okay, because you know, I think we were just so like small town guys that we.
Yeah.
So it was this sort of like real baptism in like city life, and in a funny way. And I've said this so many times. It's like I always paraphrase the Bob Dylan line of like I was born a long way from where I belong in terms of like when I got to Vancouver, I was like, this is what I've been looking for, like a city and the inclusive sort of idea of like no one cares that you have a mohawk or long hair or
Yeah.
whatever. Like they do, it's a big city and there's every different walk of life walking around you, different colors, different whatever. It didn't phase me, and I thought
Yeah.
I had grown up in a very sort of small, and I love that too. Like there's elements about that I really love, and it very what I love about going to that part of the world now, as far as like going back to Saskatchewan and places like that, they are very welcoming and they are very open uh, places. But when I grew up, it was still very sort of like very conservatively small minded in
I
that way
remember
that
that.
like,
I toured Saskatchewan in the '80s as well. Like I went through towns like Estevan and stuff like that. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially having long hair and an earring or
Yep.
earrings or whatever. It was kind of like, you just sort of attracted negative attention to yourself. So going to a big city really kind of was eye opening to me as far as like, yes, this is where I belong. And I say that now with, living in Vegas, which essentially is a small town
Yeah.
with the most craziest street in the world in it. But
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. Yeah,
yeah,
because it's not geographically a huge place.
not really. No,
It's
it's
not
like,
really a big skyscraper center or anything like the other cities, but there is the strip, right?
yeah. But it
Yeah,
is also an entertainer city. So I think people are accustomed to seeing,
yeah,
someone like me walking around or doing my thing. And if I'm sort of getting ready to go play a gig and I'm wearing whatever I'm wearing,
yeah.
they would just be like, I don't know, I guess he's a magician or something, or a hypnotist or something. It could be any walk of life that
Well, Doug Henning, to be fair, and
yeah,
Mike
yeah.
Levine from Triumph, I've never been seen in the same room together.
Yeah, that's
All
true.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say.
Yeah,
Who
you're right.
knows? It could be one guy. I don't
But
know.
I was going to say the other day when I was in Vancouver and I was walking down Granville Street, and I inevitably come across the star they gave me. But it's great when I'm walking by and I go, Bruno Gerussi. It's like I'll see these kind of like these different like these names from the Vancouver past, and
Yeah.
it's not lost on me. It really is. And like I say, we walked up and down. We didn't even go anywhere else because we were staying on Granville Street in 1989, 1990. We were just kids. And we would just walk up and down Granville Street because we didn't know what else there was. I mean, uh, uh, Granville Street was the main sort of
Yep.
downtown hang, and it was rough. Like back then, it was as bad as Hastings or Hastings Junior, as
Yeah.
far as homeless and that kind of thing. And it was,
It was
but
rough. I remember being told, "Don't go down there at night alone." I remember being
it
told
was,
that.
but we loved it. It was great. And then we eventually learned that Davie Street, you would go up the hill and there'd be a whole other world of stuff there. Go up Robson where all the shopping was, and it just became like we all ended up moving to Vancouver just in the West End, like just on the west side of all that, and all lived sort of in the downtown core, and it was a great thing. I mean, like literally for a bunch of small town guys to find themselves in a big city like that was like really eye opening and really, really, I think it opened everybody's brain. So sometimes I think like now that we have now Hamilton, Ontario is my Canadian headquarters because my wife's family's from out there, and we
Oh, is
have,
that right?
yeah, my our new world is out there. So I find when we go to Canada, I mean, my mother's in Kelowna, so I still have this sort of like bi-coastal experience.
Sure.
But my daughter is in Hamilton now. She's settled out there, so we find ourselves out there all the time, and it really opened my mind to the whole Southern Ontario kind of like, oh, this all makes sense. You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
swing
yeah.
all around that whole area, get down
I
to
never thought
Detroit
about that
if you
before,
want.
Todd.
Yeah,
That's interesting because to you, as a touring musician, it was just like you'd hit these cities, get on the bus, and then go to the next province in some cases. But now that you're there
well,
with your family, you're seeing it. See, I grew up in Brantford, which is right by Hamilton,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
was
exactly. Yeah,
that's what Ontario has in common with the United
isn't that where
States. That
Wayne
makes
Gretzky's
sense.
from?
An hour in any direction, you hit a city, right?
Yeah,
I went to high school with Glenn Gretzky.
there you go. I think we talked about this before. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I
yeah, I went
remember
to high
Glenn
school with Glenn
Gretzky. Yeah.
in the '80s, and he was,
Amazing.
well, it's like going to school with a rock star in his own way.
Of
Because, like,
course, yeah.
his brother
That
was
last name alone is it's like he's like a mob
exactly.
name or something. It's kind of like you just know that name. But I
Oh,
mean,
he
the
used to
weird
tell
thing.
teachers to go fuck themselves, like literally. Oh my God, he was like now, like, I'm not saying anything that would embarrass him because he would probably chuckle about it. I know now that he's a successful adult in his own right, but as a kid in
Hilarious.
the '80s, he'd wear Don Johnson suits. You know what I mean? The white suits and the pink shirt,
Sure.
the sleeves rolled up, and girls fawning all over him. And the
Of
teacher said,
course.
"Gretzky, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Oh fuck you," He literally did that in a math class with me one day, and I was like, "My God, man."
He's got the free pass, I guess, because of that name.
Yeah, and I was 17 when that happened. And in 2 years, I was on the road at 18 with a band from Sault Ste. Marie called Vandal.
Oh
And
yeah.
Tim Harrington, Howard Bertolo, they later went on to play with Aldo Nova with Phil.
Ah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'm telling you this for a reason because I remember we got to Edmonton. It was my first national tour. I'm 18 years old. I pick up the Edmonton Sun, and he's on the front page because he had moved to Edmonton to do some business dealings with his brother, with Wayne.
Ah, of course.
And so this guy, a couple of years earlier in high school, was telling the teacher to go fuck himself. And that's my Gretzky story. But Todd, at the top of the conversation, I was about to say interview, but as you said, conversation. The
Exactly.
way you put it.
Chat.
Yeah. Two pals hanging.
Exactly.
Before we started recording, I made a little joke to you about you're having your morning coffee about your Todd Kerns damn it liqueur putting a little
Yeah.
shot in your coffee. Now, people that are watching this may not realize. Actually, I wasn't joking. Todd has a branded liqueur. I mean, you're such an entrepreneurial spirit, man. I watch what you do. You don't waste any time. You know, that's why I always feel bad about going over and taking your time because I know how busy you are and how many things you're involved in. But the liqueur thing is amazing, and it is a liqueur, right? It's like a flavored.
It is. Yeah. It was sort of the we started a friend of ours out of Winnipeg has a company called Writers and Rockers. Robert Young is his name, and he's an incredible guy and a very entrepreneurial guy as well. And he's been very clever about creating coffee. And he came at us and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a coffee brand?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's do one." I mean, I'm a huge coffee drinker, and I started sampling multiple. I was getting together with friends and going, "What do you think of this one? What do you think of that one?" And we would tweak this and that. And it's like I'm not like in there like with beans and out in the field picking stuff. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I was tweaking. Like this is cool, but blah 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 blah. And it was a kind of a long process of trying different things and eventually landing on a brand that we were happy with. Because you got to put your name on these things, and that's the weird thing about it. I never considered that as a Kiss fan. I could probably pull 10 things out of this room right now and show you Kiss on the with their name on it. Not to say that they're like loose about that either, but it's like you're always worried that, well, what if someone gets poisoned by Todd Kerns' coffee, or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah, yeah.
and that kind of thing. So I was kind of like, well, and we eventually landed on a brand. We did another one. I was doing an Italian run, so we decided let's do an Italian blend. Long story short, they kind of spun it into the idea of a spirits and liquor.
But coffee was the gateway drug, so to speak.
And then because I'm not a massive drinker, even though there is different ones down the line that might come up, it just sort of felt like like what about like a coffee liqueur, which is a very specific type thing. I mean, it might have been more of a business move to go with a beer or a whiskey or that kind of thing. But I thought like I'm only dipping my toe into this world in the first place, so why not kind of yeah, that seemed like a very lateral move. It was coffee adjacent. And same thing, sampling this, trying that, and then eventually landing on like, this is really delicious. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you're going to sit there and guzzle a whole bottle of because of the sugar content. But especially around around Christmas time. And the weird thing about it, same as the coffee, it's like I have friends who are like, goes, you know what? It's so crazy. Is my like my parents came to visit and they just kept drinking all the Todd Kerns coffee. They don't even know who you are, but they said this is the best coffee. And I go,
that's amazing.
Well, I'll be
that's
like,
a real compliment.
I go,
That's not a fan compliment. Like that
yeah,
may be sincere nonetheless, but it's not someone drinking because they're a fan of yours. They're drinking because
it's
they're a
like,
fan of the
yeah.
coffee.
Suddenly I'm like Juan Valdez, with the kind of like, the coffee brand. But I'm like, and then the liqueur became a similar.
I wish I had enough computer skills to put you in a big sombrero and
put
a
my
poncho.
sombrero on here, yeah, and away we go. Yeah. But it's kind of like, it's kind of like Juan Valdez. But it's kind of like, which is funny because when you actually go down to like Colombia, there's actually Juan Valdez. It's an actual brand,
Yeah.
I think Colombia, I can't remember, but anyway, and then the liqueur was a similar move. It was kind of like, well, hey, people are they're really into it, and I have friends that do bartending and whatnot, and they say people come up to them all the time, and they go, they'll want a shooter as they call it in the prairies,
yeah.
And in Canada, and it'll be like, surprise me, which I always find really interesting. I'm like, they say that. And they go, check this out. And they always, and they said they would, it's not like they're doing, of course they do it because they're supporting me, but
Yeah,
they wouldn't sort of follow up if it wasn't getting a positive reaction.
that's true.
So
But was it good, right?
yeah, so the people go like, "Damn, what was that?" And then off it goes. So it started as available in Manitoba, and it's sort of slowly growing. And you know, alcohol is a lot different than coffee as far as like being able to kind of move it around it because
Can't
it
really sell
is
it online, I'd imagine, right?
yeah because it's kind of like a controlled substance. I'm not sure what
Yeah,
you call it,
sure, it is
but
absolutely.
it is what it is. So it's kind of like it's pretty rad that like I say, it's I'm a guy from small town Saskatchewan, and to be in a world where you know, to be honest with you, through Took, there's all kinds of. I don't want to talk too much about what we have going on there because I'm not sure. I'm the kind of guy who just ends up spilling beans left and right. Beans. We should make beans. No,
Pun
uh,
intended. Coffee
yeah,
beans.
yeah. But we have things coming up in different licensing deals as well. But, I've
Nice.
been very
Am I
lucky. I
about to
mean,
get
we
an exclusive here? Is that what's going on, or no? Probably
I
not.
a lot of it's just talk at this point. But I've been lucky enough to get like we had a Never Enough for You. The Took song was on a number 1 Netflix movie last year,
Nice.
and Age of Electric has a song coming out in a horror film next year. So
Got it.
it's like I say, I'm just some guy from Saskatchewan who eventually anticipates. Like when I said that, it's funny that I paraphrased that Bob Dylan thing where I was born a long way from where I belong. I don't know that that's really true. When I was younger, I would have said all day long, I'm a big city guy. I could live in New York City.
Yeah, I think you anticipate you imagined it as a child, but you actually did it as a young
Yeah,
adult.
I say
That's a
that
great
though.
lyric, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's
I'm
a
not
great
sure.
lyric.
I always forget the actual quote, but I understand it because, for those of us who go to places, and I'm lucky enough to go to places like New York City, and you just feel this energy and you go to actually put roots down here. And if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. All that bullshit is 100% true. But there is a part of me that is 100% aware of the fact that in the circle of my life, there's a very likely idea that I will end up in a very quiet final chapter of my life in terms of probably a smaller, quieter community, even though where I'm living right now in the suburbs of Las Vegas is for all intents and purposes very quiet and very, very mellow. I could just
Yeah.
drive 15 minutes over there and it can be the craziest spot on the planet. But
That's amazing. I have friends in
maybe
Vegas,
that's
and
sort
I've
of the
noticed
thing.
that it's nuts, man. The
Mm-hmm.
contrast. Again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've experienced it. Is what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. I have friends that, like you, in the music industry, live in the suburbs. You visit them, and it's just like small town USA. And then you drive 5 minutes later on the strip, and it's insanity and boobs and mayhem, right? Like people trying to sell you everything and
Yeah.
anything on the street.
Well,
So it's hard, yeah.
you become sort of like I remember this is a funny thing to say, but I remember on that Faster Pussycat tour, I'd been living in Vegas for about a year, and I went and did this Faster Pussycat run, and we were in the UK, and we walked into some club, and it was like one of those nights where they had dancing girls on the tables and
Yeah.
scantily clad, and I remember all these other guys being like, "Whoa," and I was kind of like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah," and
Yeah.
I felt like Duvall in Apocalypse Now, where the explosions are going off and he's barely affected because I'd been living in Vegas for years, and every club had go-go dancing girls in their underwear, and you just become so desensitized to it.
It's true, right? I
Um, you know,
imagine.
and I don't think that that's a negative. I think it really is kind of one of those things where, you know, it's not that that you purposely surrounded yourself with it, but you just become kind of like whatever. It's like super normal. And being in the entertainment industry and the showbiz,
Yeah.
it's like you're just around it, craziness all the time. Even
True.
though I've always been a pretty straight, uh, relatively sober kind of mind. At least once I got into the successful part of it, I was already kind of like had left all the craziness behind. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny they say with Bill Wyman. I read a lot of Stone's biographies and
yeah,
biographies, and he was straight as a die, didn't have anything more than the occasional beer, didn't do drugs, and he, you know, so much insanity and so many decades surrounding the Stones from the '60s culture all the way up to that things would happen around him, and he would just be so calm in the eye of the storm. I'm trying to remember who it was. I read someone's book. They said they were backstage with the Stones, and this drunk girl fell, and she fell through a partition, a temporary wall that they put up to make a dressing room. She fell through the wall. She was so drunk, And Bill Wyman was standing there with a coffee. He said, well, she fell through the wall.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Like, like you're
it's
saying,
just
with the
it's
bomb
just
going
a
off around him.
it's just a Tuesday in the Rolling Stones. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and I
It's
mean, even at my level, the touring and things that I've done, it's the same thing. You become, I don't want to say jaded because I like to think that I appreciate life too much to be jaded,
it's
but
yeah,
maybe
desensitized.
desensitized.
Yeah, but it's
No.
not necessarily a negative thing because it's kind of like, you're in this industry. It doesn't mean that you lose the good part of yourself. If I saw a girl fall between the partition, I would go over and help her. But
Yeah, exactly. Or Bill
but
Wyman's like,
I,
oh, there's another girl falling from
but
the
it
partition.
wouldn't
Right?
necessarily be all that. It would be weird backstage with our bands because our bands are so much more, you know, we're not those kind of guys. But
Yeah, yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, it's 100% like, we all hear those stories. And I look back on that stuff as big. The Who was my favorite band as a kid. And I loved all those stories. But as an adult now, the idea of the drummer has trashed the hotel room and we've got to move hotels would be unacceptable.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, not to
I'd be
mention
like,
it would come out of your
I'd be like, what?
tour pay, right? I
This is
mean,
gonna cost us thousands of
yeah.
dollars, and now we're all moving hotels at 3 a.m. I'm like, absolutely, that guy's got to go. But I love it as a story and all that kind of stuff. Is like, yeah, of course, that's that's
Do,
part of
do you
the.
remember your first in your first early days of touring making? I can remember the difference between touring even at club level, cover band level, between Ontario and the West was that most of the bars in the West were in hotels. So you got
Yes.
an actual nice hotel room with a colored TV,
Yeah.
and you could order room service and make phone calls. And then I remember getting my first bill for, I was calling my mom, calling my friends back home.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah.
was 18 when I started touring, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in Edmonton, and then I get the phone bill at the end of the week and like, oh my God, I ordered a
Yeah.
bagel and it was $17 or whatever.
Don't do that. Even now, I think all those lessons that you just brought up are why I am so suspicious of literally everything in hotels. My wife will just be like, "We'll just order room service," and I'm like really side eyeing the whole thing. Like it's like, because as soon as you open the menu in your room, you're like, okay, so it's $40 for a burger and fries or whatever,
Yeah.
and a drink. You're like, okay, but
And
I
your per
think
diems can be spent better elsewhere, as far as I'm concerned, than for the
essentially, yeah, I mean,
$25 bagel, right?
exactly. But I mean, back when I was a kid, there was no such thing as a per diem. I would have
Yeah,
been, it
yeah,
would have been
that's true.
glorious. The amount of money I was making in a week is less than a daily per diem now, or
Yeah,
at least a
I
weekly
reckon.
per diem.
Our
Yeah,
salary was $125 a week back then, I think, on it, but it's like we didn't need much to get by, right?
mine was 100. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah, there.
I remember my we had two crew guys. We paid 150, and we paid each other $100. And I
Yeah,
remember laughing because the lighting guy was always borrowing money off me. I'm like, we pay you $50
you
more than
get
me.
more
How
than
am I?
me. Yeah,
He smoked and he was a lot more like that kind of guy. And I was like,
yeah, yeah,
how do you, and he was like that kind of guy. And he was probably charging things to his room. So he was constantly like in debt from week to week
yeah,
to
yeah,
week.
yeah. It's funny.
I
Our
never did.
sound
I
man
was
made
always like,
five
no.
hundred a week. Our
Oh,
sound man made
wow.
500 a week. And he used to have steak
He's
on
rolling
Sundays.
it.
I remember
Oh, of course.
we'd go to a Casey's or something and have a few drinks and unwind on a day off, one day off in the week, and he would have a steak dinner. I remember being so envious, and I look back on it.
And you're counting change so you can pay for a drink. Yeah.
Yeah,
Been
it's like,
there.
do I have a drink or do I have a hamburger? Oh, a drink.
Yeah, been there. We've all been there.
Yeah,
I had like, like a loaf of bread in my room with
yeah.
like
Jar of
you know,
peanut butter and
I was telling a story the other night. We used to call it a 3 dog night because at 7-Eleven you could buy 3 hot dogs for $1.
I remember. I used to put
Yeah.
the chili and cheese on them too.
Yeah,
From
you
the
could get
yeah,
that
yeah,
thing from
yeah.
the thing. Yeah. You're just
You
like
didn't want to run with me after that. Trust me.
totally styling. And if you were lucky enough to be in a bar that had like things like peanuts or like popcorn, you'd be
Yeah,
like, yes, you could like take a thing of that and just kind of like, you were never
yeah.
really, it wasn't like you were ever full. You just make yourself sick enough to not be hungry.
It's true, right? I know, but
Yeah.
we had cast iron stomachs back then. Do
Yeah.
you remember the restaurant chain Chi-Chi's, the Mexican restaurant chain?
Yes. Yes, I
They
do.
used to give out free salsa chips and hot cheese and salsa dip as long as you were drinking in the bar. So that was the
Right.
road trick. We would go there and just like literally they would give us a huge bowl of this cheese, and that would be dinner. As long as we were drinking beer, we were able to get through.
The bottomless salad bar was always a dream come true too. If you were ever lucky enough to go to like a
I'm
Ponderosa or
Scottish.
whatever
We
that
didn't
place
really
was
eat
called.
salads though. Everything was deep
Well, it
fried and
was
boiled.
they had everything on it like boiled eggs and all kinds of things like that. So you could kind
Yeah.
of like You could just
Yeah.
kind of load up. But probably why I'm still thin, I guess, is just, but
No, true.
but I never complained one day. I would never have changed a thing. I remember at the
Yeah.
time being
It made
like,
you who you are, right?
guys would drop off to go to school and get a real job, and I'd be like, why?
Yeah.
This is the best.
Even,
Anyway,
same
now we
with
can.
me. I mean, like the forays I had into recording acts weren't successful per se. But I said, you know what? I'm a musician. This is what I do. And if it means for a few years, I did cruise ships because I had to. I was going through a
Sure,
divorce. I
sure,
needed
yeah,
to make
yeah,
money.
yeah,
I
yeah.
did cover bands because I had to. You know what I mean? I don't care. I'm still playing music. I'm not working in a factory and hating my life. You know?
That's the big thing. Yeah. I mean, and I said that when I came to Vegas, it was a lot of that because guys were playing in different shows, doing covers, doing, whatever. And I was kind of like, hey, man, you're playing guitar, you have a house, you're taking care of your family. I think you're a
Right.
success story, really. As far as I'm concerned, that's a success. So, it is what it is.
So Todd, thanks so much, man. Every time we get together and chat, it's like it's a it's a bountiful of wishes. Like there's so many things I want to discuss with you. I love our discussions because you're very verbose and you're a well-spoken guy and you've got some incredible stories and incredible experiences. So thank you for sharing them with me and the people that, the few thousand people that do watch this channel. I do appreciate that. Want to close it up with some Took stuff now. I noticed in the last 3 months of where I've just been existing and you've been thriving and kicking ass all over the globe, as we've
Hey,
already
you're
discussed
existing. Come
some
on.
of it. Uh, but we didn't get around to talking about the Took shows that you did,
Yeah.
including some shows with Def Leppard. I think with a handful of shows with Def Leppard. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like we discussed the Triumph thing, but then afterwards there was some casinos and appearances and stuff, and then again opening for Def Leppard. Could you please tell me a bit about it?
It's really interesting. I mean, because the whole Toque thing started years ago as a fun thing, doing some charity shows. Just Brent Fitz had the idea of like, what if we only played Canadian rock and roll? And I thought that'd be really fun. It'd be a real, again, that challenge that, saying yes to something as nuts as that was kind of like, great. So it's in Winnipeg. We're playing with guys from, at that time, it would just be a kind of bit of a revolving door. Guys from the Guess Who, guys from Orphan, guys from Streetheart. And then as time went by, and now all these years later, having been a part of like sort of Helix's 50th anniversary, Phil X and myself and Fitz are a part of that Rock You, the new version of Rock You,
Yeah.
and then a part of the Triumph tribute record, and then the playing with Triumph Live, and then doing Streetheart stuff and all this kind of stuff that has sort of kind of bizarrely kind of come into fruition. Because I think a lot of it is because we have such deep love and respect for an entire genre of music. Growing up in the prairies where I was hearing Under My Thumb by Streetheart,
Yeah.
and then hearing, whatever AC/DC, Rolling Stones, whatever else I was hearing on the radio.
All right next to each other, right?
Yeah. So as far as I was concerned, sorry, I've got to kill
Cool,
that.
though.
Did I just turn?
The finger that has played the world.
But the whole idea of like all that Canadian music kind of finding its way into this band, turning into into a real thing. It became something that we sort of, it's from the right place, and that has never changed. The love and the homage and the respect and the tribute to Canadian music sort of became, we got to call it something. Somebody wanted to call it the Tooks, and I said, well, let me say it like Rush, Triumph, Toque. I said,
Yeah.
I go, so boom, that became Toque, and now Toque, all these years later, to be included on bills with, Joan Jett and Bret Michaels and Queensryche and Def Leppard,
Wow.
is a bizarre thing. I mean, we were lucky enough to do some Def Leppard shows with Slash several years ago. And my experience with those guys is how suspiciously friendly they are. you're like, there's a Canadian thing, and then there's a sort of like Northern English friendliness.
Groups.
Yeah. And it's like, they're like on the verge of like, let's go get a pint. And here's a story. Here's a Joe Elliott story, just to put it in perspective. I saw them on the Pyromania tour I was like a young teenager in Regina. They had Uriah Heep opening for them on the Pyromania tour, and they were like, they were we loved. They were the next big thing. Like High
Yeah.
and Dry is still my one of my touchstone records, but um, I kind of lost track of them over the years, like most heritage bands have been around forever. So I'm talking to we played a few shows with Slash and the guys opening for a few Def Leppard shows, and I'm standing there talking to Joe Elliott, and I go, as a huge Bowie fan, I go, tell me about this story of you playing with Mick and Trevor from the Spiders from Mars. Him and Phil Collins had this side band with Mick and Trevor, who were
Trevor Boulder, right? Yeah.
the rhythm section for the David Bowie Spiders from Mars. And he goes, "Oh, mate," and he just went down a whole. We went down a whole rabbit hole together. And he goes, "Give me your email address, and I'll send you some stuff." And I remember thinking, like, well, this is a very elaborate way of, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I just thought, like, there's no way that's going to happen. It's like, long story short, I give him my email address, and it's like weeks later, I get an email from Joe Elliott saying, "Hey, Todd, that was fun. Give me your address, your mailing address, and I'll send you some stuff." I go, "What?" I go, "He's going a long way with this ruse." And I give him my address, and sure enough, a box of stuff shows up, all these DVDs and CDs and things like that
Amazing.
of that lineup, all signed by the band. And I was like, "What?" I go, and I felt it's something about the weird kind of polite prairie guy where you don't. I'm not going to bother Joe Elliott by writing
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
him. So I kind of like did that. Oh, thank you so much. And that was kind of like the end of our communique, it was sort of like, and then, I just sort of like, and then years later, I'm standing in, was it Edmonton or Regina? I can't remember. We played our set. I'm getting ready to walk back. I'm walking up the ramp to go wherever I was going as Def Leppard is showing up in their wheels. And Joe comes out, and he's a tall guy. He's almost, I think he's around my height, but he goes like, "Hey,
Is that right?
he goes, I just saw you on TV." And I go, "What?" I go, yeah. I had been doing some press, local press. And
Yeah.
I go, "Wow, wow." I go, it was just like that weird thing of like, I don't think he connected that he remembered me from being in Slash's band, but I think he was like, "Oh, I just saw you." And I was like, "No way, wow."
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
So, but it was just this really friendly, like there's like no rock starism about them at all.
Uh,
And Corey has been working with Rick Allen on a bunch of different projects with Rick Allen's wife.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, that
in,
they
in,
have
in
the drumming
yeah, yeah, yeah,
project that they do. I don't remember the specifics yet, but
yeah. In LA, they work on that. Corey's been working with him on that. So it's a really interesting kind of like uh, very friendly, inclusive world. So the fact that that Took got to do 4 different shows with Def Leppard this year is a huge
amazing.
deal. And hopefully we'll be able to do more next year or whatever the equivalent of those tours
Yeah.
through the prairies end up being. I mean, the big goal for Took, we keep releasing new music. We released a song called Fighters this year that's
Yeah, I
done
saw that.
done better than ever for us as far as like in that world of whatever new music does. We have a new single
It's a
coming
great
out.
song. Video is cool
Oh,
too.
thank you. We got a new one coming out for the winter run. And then it's just sort of like really focusing on all that. 2026 is there's not a lot of Slash activity. We just finished the new Slash record, so that
Did you
probably
say
won't.
there is a lot of Slash activity or not?
There's not, no, because we got a Guns tour, we got an Alter Bridge tour, we got a bunch of stuff like that. So Took becomes sort of the main focus of 2026
Nice.
in many ways. So we're trying to align. It's always a case of like Corey was just doing a residency with Kelly Clarkson out here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So we did some stuff without him, but we had Zach Throne from Jerry Cantrell's band and Corey Taylor's band. So it's like it's become a real focus, which sort of initially, like I say, like I think some of the best things always start from a place of love and in a place of fun, and
That
then
makes
kind of
sense.
then it grow to be something that continues to be fun and it continues to be full of love. Um, somehow it finds its way to being successful. So now we're going into a BC run this coming up soon, and then we'll put it on ice for a minute while we get the new song finished, and then that will come out for the winter run that we always do post Christmas into New Year's. New Year's is in Winnipeg this year,
Yeah.
We like to
I
go to the
saw the
coldest.
advertisement for that. Yeah, the
Yeah,
just a pre-New Year's show in the somewhere in the West.
we always like to go to the coldest places on the planet for for
You're Canadian.
yeah, exactly. We're not afraid of it.
The polar magnet.
Exactly. So, it's part of the fun. And I think that, like I say, watching this thing grow very organically all these years has been really rewarding. And I think that that's, it's really the only way to say it is it's been like nothing but rewarding.
Good stuff. And it's nice to see that you guys are truly friends and stuff as well. It's nice.
I first met Corey in 19, it's like 40 years ago now. It's like when I think about it, or yeah, 40 years. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know. It's crazy to consider we were just kids, like
Yeah.
he was like the local phenom, wunderkind, you know what I mean? Like he was just
And,
that guy.
well, it's funny because the vibe comes across. I mean, you
I
and
hope so.
Spencer are hand in
We're
glove. By the
brothers.
way, if you talk to him, plant the seed that I'm a decent guy to do an interview with because he's on the
Absolutely.
fence with me because he never does any podcasts or anything. He goes, Archie, I
He's not
might
much
do
of
it.
a
He says, I might do it. Just tell him I'm not a serial killer or anything.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
not much of a chatter. I always enjoy these things. I find
Yeah.
especially talking to you, it's sort of like, it's like I say, it's I'm having a coffee with a pal, talking some shit, and then get on with my
Appreciate
day.
that, Todd.
Yeah,
That's kind,
absolutely.
man. And thank you for your time as always, man. You're such a cool guy. And when you get ready to promote whatever is next in your life, if you want, with the next, you're saying there's the stuff coming up with Took, whatever you want to do, you're always welcome to come here and waste some time with me, man, because your time is valuable, but it's truly appreciated. You're a good man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I hope to see you sometime. I'm trying so hard to get Tuke out there on the regular in the Ontario area. So hopefully one of these days.
For sure. You're a good man. Hopefully I get
Thank you, brother.
out to Vegas. I haven't had a trip out in a while. I'm considering NAM this year. I don't know. I gotta
Oh yeah.
I gotta lose some weight and get rid of the gray and try to look like a rock and roller again if I do. You know what I mean? Because I still have
uh,
my endorsements with Fabian, Remo, Headhunters, and I'm not really in the game anymore per se. I still play, but I'm not in the game. If you know what I'm talking about. I can't go out there looking like this. And I like, did we sign fucking Kenny Rogers to
oh,
Remo?
honestly, a lot of the cats, I mean, who've been around a long time are looking,
Yeah.
way more gray, and
Well,
everybody's been leaning into that more, like as
thanks, buddy. It's nice to be able to let it go for a little while, but if you
yeah.
let it go for too long, it becomes a habit, right?
Well, that's
So,
true. Yeah.
the point being is I might make my way west at some point in the next few
Yeah.
months, and
Well, if you
hopefully,
end up
like
in
again.
Nam, there's a good chance I'll be there. I usually go, and I don't have any big plans in January, so why not?
And again, I like to get away from the cold, so maybe even Vegas. But either way, I'd like to sit down and buy you a beer or whatever it may be, have a
Yeah.
coffee and chat.
Yeah.
But
In
thanks for your
person would
time,
be
Ty.
nice. No problem, brother. Please
Okay,
take
buddy.
care.
I'll
Have a
talk to you
great
soon,
day.
man. I'll send you
Come.
that link right now.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.